So we are about 10 lines from the top of Beis, and the line begins with the word Vitziyur. There are two lines beginning with the word Vitziyur, one beneath the other, and we are on the second one. There is a principle in here that we're always at a loss to kind of relate to it. How are you misunderstanding be'etzem ha'inyan? K'mei shu be'etzem mamash. How do you, like was asked yesterday, how do you get hold of it? The basis of these kind of questions is that we perceive ourselves as essentially making ourselves. If I have something, if I understand something, for example, I understand it because I made myself understand it. This is really the worldly perception, worldly experience. But you have to understand that this is the perception that is devoid of nefesh, of neshama. This is the perception that views the world from a totally functional level. Something is known because something hit it in the head. That's where he knows it. No difference between a human being and an animal, or even an animate object. That is something which we can really grasp. We can really understand. How does one thing know of something else? Because something else hit it, or provided something. Etzem, we mentioned many times, there is not such an entity in the world, in the worldly context, the entire principle of Etzem. Etzem is a godly reality, not a worldly reality. And it is present in the world, yes indeed, it's present in the world, because the world is a godly creation. And in that sense, it's a godly creation. It is not a godly creation historically. It can never become part and parcel of the world. It is a godly creation continually. And this is why there is that reality in the world. In the world, everything has to have a cause and effect. And Etzem, that is in the world, that is a super worldly presence. How do we relate to it and how do we understand it? We are learning about it. If we are learning about it, that means that there is some way, like the Rebbe says, if you're learning about it, it means that there is some kind of an intellectual perception what we are learning about. If this is super worldly, what kind of intellectual perception is it? The answer is, this is what the Rebbe says. I mean, there's a higher element because in Oineg HaNefesh and so forth, but in terms of learning and knowledge, Chochmah has the level of Hergish, where Chochmah recognizes, not only recognizes by external proof, but is margish, that there is something superworldly in the entire phenomenon of existence, and it relates to it. Chokhmah relates to that superworldly element. This is why we keep on repeating. Chokhmah is a miracle, godly combination. That on the one hand it relates to that which is superworldly and is able to translate it on the worldly level. The moshel that we have for this, we can call it phenomenon, for this type of observation, or this type of acceptance, of accepting something that is superworldly. Chokhmah is in the world, and here he is able to be margish something that is superworldly. If it's superworldly, how you margish it? And how do you know you have something there? Sense. In this argosha, in this sense of chokhmah, there are two shlagim, two steps. One is within the world, and the second one is really out of the world. Within the world is a logical step. And the logical step is that the world cannot make itself. It doesn't have the capacity to make itself. Anything in the world has been brought into it. So, if Chokhmah were satisfied in being in the world and having answered the question, where does the world come from? It says it came from outside of the world. And if it's satisfied with that, then that end of story. But Chokhmah is not satisfied with that. Because Chokhmah, this is the Hergish of Chokhmah, says, okay, yes, it came from outside of the world. I want to relate to that. I want to relate to that which is outside of the world, which is super world. Only Chokhmah is capable of doing that. Because Chokhmah is capable of saying, I don't care if I really grasp it, if I really touch it, I just want to relate to it. If my presence is totally effaced means does not have a presence, it's fine with me. I just want to relate to this truth. And this way, the Chokhmah is able to relate to it. The moshel for this is a living moshel. This we mentioned one of these days. The principle of Torah, Moshe Kibul Torah Misina Misorah Yeshua Liskeni. The Torah comes to us Sinai and being transmitted from generation to generation to generation. And we explain, what do you need to transmission? I can understand on my own. You wrote a book and I can read it. That which you wrote a book, that's within the world. I want to know how this is in its origin. I want to relate to its origin, to its truth. This is the Shalshelas HaKabbalah. Shalshelas HaKabbalah is, but the Gemara says, Talmid sheyeshiv lifnei Rabbi. Everyone knows this because you say it by the Maimon, the Chassidus Maimon. Talmid sheyeshiv lifnei Rabbi. Veisif saves of Neitzes made with Meir. He's sitting in front of his Rabbi, and Rabbi is teaching him, and he is not drooling. In other words, he's in full control of himself. He's not a Talmid. At the time when he's Makabah from his Rab, he doesn't exist. This is the Chokhmah. He receives what the Rab is giving him. He doesn't receive it because it makes sense to him. If it makes sense to him, you might as well learn on your own. You're not a makabel. You are a makabel only if you're a makabel what the Rabbi is saying, per se. You have the capacity for this because of this bittul of chokhmah. Where at that moment you are sensing what the Rabbi is saying. You don't understand it. You are sensing it. Understanding will come later. This principle is extremely important, both in the realm that we're talking about, Torah and learning and so forth. But this is the process of living itself. This is the process of living itself. We do not understand life. How do we accept life if we don't understand it? The answer is, I want to be Magish life. I don't care if I understand it or not. I don't want to understand it. I can't understand it. I want to follow through on life. I don't want to grab it and grasp it. It's absolutely sufficient for me to be with it and have it, and I don't need to know what it is. This is how we to receive life. This is why life also comes through chokhmah. Chokhmah is the source of life in our bodily experience. Okay, again, there's always much more to say, and as you're speaking, you want to say more, but you have to put a gvul. But this is the important point. Yes, we're speaking about etzem mamash, mufshim kol avush, mitzir. The oineg nefesh. The oineg nefesh. This is literally the godly presence in the nefesh. The nefesh does not have it on its own. The nefesh is a godly presence, a God being who provides this. We explained yesterday that the oinik element in the etzem nefesh, this is the atzmius, so to speak, the nefesh knowing that it is an atzmi. This is the oinik. But this is all, the whole union of atzmis comes mitzad them because we have boirei. And this is essentially the explanation, the difference between the oineg atzmi, the oineg, the way it is in etzem nefesh, and the inyan ha-chokhmah, where in chokhmah it comes b'tziyur dover ma. B'tziyur dover ma, and explain the words b'tziyur dover ma clearly. You should understand b'tziyur dover ma does not mean what it is. It means that there is something, a dover, I think. The motion for this, from chokhmah, it's extremely important even to relate to be margish, is the motion for it is sight. And we discussed this a lot lately. In sight, we can identify all three levels if we focus in carefully. The atzmi, the Chochma, the Tziyud over Ma, and the Protim. The Protim, we can understand, we can focus in on everything that we see individually. And we also can readily recognize and relate to the principle that everything that we see is really emanating from the total reality that we see. Which is what provides it with a being. This is what we always mention, that in sight, you open your eyes and you see everything. The emphasis on everything. And everything. Can you see everything if it's cumulative? You see everything because you're seeing it from a different level. From totality of being. It's really an amazing experience, if you think of it. At a glance, you see the entire reality. That reality is immeasurable. How many miles do you see? There's no limit. As far as existence goes, that's how far you see. And then there is also, as part of the Hergesh of sight, that what I see is only the way I see it. This is not the reality of it. The reality of it is beyond sight. This is the other element. No, this is the upper element in Chochmah. This is the Oineg, the connection between Chochmah and Oineg.
Again, an element of what I see is just a...
This is the Mitzias, the Dover Ma.
As opposed to...
Then there's the Oineg in the Chochmah, which is beyond Dover Ma, this is where the Dover Ma comes from. So let's step into this one. If this is such a thing, which we cannot have a grasp of, which we cannot really grab and walk away with, we in our neshama b'guf, in our human experience, what's the point of learning it? What's the point of saying, Misha Shayach Hergish there? What's Hergish? What's the point of Hergish? Yes, indeed. Living like an animal hardly is much simpler, much more controllable, and much of the world today has chosen that path. But much of the world, even in the world, It does not want to accept that. I want to be a human being. I want to base my life on intellect, on intellect, on intellectual reality. A Yid, he's instructed to do that. This is what a Yid is here about. He is instructed to know that there's a motzurish and mamchikol nimtz. This is what a Yid is about. To know that which is not knowable. Moshe Rabbeinu warns Eden all over and over again. Remember, you never saw anything. You didn't see any tzir in Neighbors. Lady Yisrael called Tmuna. You didn't see anything. Don't begin to imagine that there is a Tmuna, that you can grasp it. If you cannot pursue life without having a Tmuna, then you have not accepted your Torah. It's right there in Torah's Moshe. This is what we're learning. To have a clarity and to know what is a Yid. I think this phone is acting up again. Okay, so let's do a little bit inside. And the line starts with the tziyur, the second, the tziyur kuli. That they're saying that the oineg ha'atzmi, this is where the nefesh is misaneg, not with some kind of a formulation of the oineg. It is misaneg in the etzem in himself, and it is be'etzem nefesh. He doesn't know what he's misaneg of. V'yevshel leimar, this is in parentheses, v'yevshel leimar, it's conceivable, shezei inyan v'lo yikonif eid. Now this is the principle that is expressed in the Buah. V'lo yikonif eid meirecho, the end of the Apostle, v'lo yikonif eid meirecho, v'lo yikonif, which means v'lo yikonif eid b'bchinas knaf u'lavush. That meirecho, your teacher, which means that Eibishter will no longer present himself to you in a gnaf u'lavush, in a garment, but it will your eyes will see the teacher himself, not the formulation that he presents. This your eyes will perceive, not your mind will see, but your eyes will perceive. And the emphasis and the eyes over here is that this is b'bchinas re'iyas ho'ayin mamash. This is b'bchinas, and we will discuss where the word b'chinas comes in here. Re'iyas ho'ayin mamash, the sight of the eye, mamash, the literal eye, shelamaylo maylo, which is way beyond b'bchinas re'iyas ein haseichel. From that bechina which is called Re'iyas Ein HaSeichel, the sighting of the mind's eye. So he doesn't discuss it, but he makes this clear statement that Re'iyas Ayin Mamosh is much higher than Re'iyas Ein HaSeichel. Even though Re'iyas Ein HaSeichel is also called Re'iyah, sighting, and because it is a proper term for it. Nevertheless, the Riyas of Ayin Mamash is much superior. Let us, we have now, well, from today's discussion, we have now a means to understand. What is sight? In essence, see it. See it means that I can see and know it without even understanding what it is, without experiencing it. Seeing means I see it and we say this is the reality of the thing. If it is beyond my capacity to understand, that means that I don't see it. Ein HaSeichel also has that quality. Riyas Ein HaSeichel, seeing with the mind's eye has that quality. That's why we're saying that sight, Ein HaSeichel is Chochmah, this is the Borag HaMavrik. It's a spark which you don't really grasp, you don't really see what you see. And this is why it comes in this form of Borag HaMavrik, because if it's something that you can grasp, then you haven't seen anything. And then there is, it says, a much higher inner Riyas Ayin Gashmi, which is much superior to Riyas Ein HaSeichel. And now we can understand the difference. Because Riyas Ein HaSeichel, despite the fact that it is sight, but there is an element of Seichel inherent in it. I see it because I see it, because my Seichel sees it. So Riyas Ein HaSeichel. One element in this, one second, it's not coming through well. One element in this is that in Riyas Ein HaSeichel you can see only that which you focused on seeing. How does the Borag HaMavrik come? When you full focus and dedication, then the Borag HaMavrik comes. So you see it because you want to see. That is not comparable to Riyas Ayin Mamash, Ayin Gashmi, where you're totally uninvolved. You see it because of the truth of it itself. Riyas Ayin Gashmi is Sholoi Biyar, is much higher than Riyas Ein HaSeichel, even though Riyas Ein HaSeichel qualifies for the word Re'iyah in relative to Seichel. But Riyas Ayin Mamash is a completely different thing. And more in detail of that we will discuss in the Mitzvah tomorrow. Okay, this is it for this morning. I hate to go and confront him again.